Foreword Part 3, an excerpt from The Mark and the Market. Collectively, these all point to an economy based on scripture and spirituality, or rather, the economy of spirit. For the cultural Christian, the above assertions will be difficult to understand. For scriptural Christians, two very basic scripture governs the above thesis and subthesis. The first being related to trafficking of Mystery Babylon 1, and cinnamon, and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Revelation 18:13, the second being related the spiritual marriage of heaven and earth through two. 6 whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew 18:18. Historically, the transatlantic enslaved populations were bound, or kept in bondage. At places dedicated to selling enslaved persons, they were sold. One such place was Wall Street. Similar to how churches are dedicated to God, Wall Street was dedicated to the selling of black persons as slaves. When churches are no longer used for worship, they are deconsecrated, and the dedication to God is removed. Historically, Wall Street was dedicated to the selling of black persons. However, after emancipation, the site did not go through any process similar to the removing the dedication, nor was it deconsecrated in the selling of black persons. Spiritually, the binding of Wall Street to the selling of black persons is still bound in heaven. It is this historical and spiritual dedication that governs the modern-day stock market. Furthermore, it is the historical and spiritual context that most human trafficking rings operate within. Moreover, the descendants of the people that were originally involved in the slave trade or creating spaces dedicated to the selling of person as slaves are generally still involved in the covert selling of trafficked persons. Along with this historical context is the concerning reality, whereas the descendants of the people that were involved in either selling slaves or creating spaces dedicated to selling slaves are predominantly involved in children's services or social work. The establishment of social services should have a stipulation that prevents descendants of either slave traders or those historically responsible for creating spaces for selling slaves from becoming social workers or employees of children's services. This is a very intense and uncomfortable subject matter. Yet, an honest analysis and conversation is necessary in regard to modern-day slave trade in the form of human trafficking. While the suggested precaution may appear to be somewhat prejudiced, there is a need to ensure the safety of marginalized children. For those whose families were not historically involved in the slave trade, the suggestion will appear commonsensical. For those whose families were involved in the slave trade, the suggestion may feel persecutorial. Yet, a specific science was developed in order to justify the continuation of the enslavement of black people. That is, the science of eugenics has been and continues to be viewed as a legitimate science, and many people and groups still use eugenics to formulate their perspectives and opinions. Eugenics as a science was applied to black people in general, and it is historically related to gender dynamics of pre-industrialized society. That is, women were viewed to be mentally fickle, emotional, etc., and as such restricted to the home. Eugenics, therefore, was formed from a long-established history and belief system that prejudiced the individual based on individual, group, family, and social systems of belief. From the long history of enslavement, the science of eugenics, and the continued social prejudices towards the descendants of the enslaved, it may be asserted that such histories and prejudices are fundamentally ingrained and are not easily erased. Furthermore, if the underlying theory of eugenics were to be applied equally to all ethnicities, one may argue that there is enough historical evidence to suggest that modern-day slavery in the form of human trafficking is being perpetrated and continued by the genetic descendants of slave traders. Many politicians and academics argue that change is a process, or change does not happen overnight. Thus, in the same breath, it may be argued that change of previously prejudiced opinions, social orders, or industries such as slavery does not happen overnight. Based on this platitudinal argument, it may be asserted that the industry of human trafficking did not change overnight, nor was it eradicated by a few well-intentioned policies. However, there is no real mechanism to detect the genetic propensity towards criminal activity or human trafficking. There are, however, real investigative mechanisms to detect propensity towards human trafficking, based on socioeconomics, institutional prejudice, experiential education, group association, and history. Eugenic sciences considered the enslaved to be 3/5 humans, i.e. not full human beings. The science of eugenics was used in an attempt to justify the condition of enslaved persons as property. For the uneducated, the arguments of eugenics resonated as truth. Moreover, many uneducated in biblical scripture argued that the scripture promotes slavery, and as such for many slavery is seen as a divine decree. Yet, when the scriptures are fully analyzed, a spiritual pattern is noted. First, one God is just, and two, God decrees that what one does to another will be done to them. Secondly, God does not promote slavery, he promotes retribution. This is noted as the scripture, whereas it is stated, O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. Psalms 137, 8-9. It is further noted that Mystery Babylon was being punished for many things, 2 of which are trafficking in 11 slaves and 2 souls. The view of slavery as divinely decreed is generally promoted by those uneducated in Scripture. Nonetheless, these ideas permeate into modern society and are used to justify the trafficking of human beings. The Scriptures, however, argue that it is a trading network connected to Mystery Babylon that encourages leaders and business persons to trade various items and persons. The Scripture describes Mystery Babylon in ways that do not equate to a person, but a system. This narrative argues that this system is either the stock exchange or fundamentally attached to the stock exchange. Mystery Babylon is described as thus. 11. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. 12. The merchandise of gold, and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all thin wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, 13. And cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. 14. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. 15. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. 16. And saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple, and scarlet, and decked with gold, and precious stones, and pearls. 17. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. 18. And cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? 19. And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Revelation 18, 11-19. Select the next video for part 4. Thanks for listening. Comment and share.